The following program may contain subject matter and language suitable for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
And welcome to another episode of The Meltdown. My name is not Jeff.
And my name is not Norm.
I thought I was going to catch on that one.
I listen carefully to your intros.
I know you do, because you're like, okay, what's he going to do now? And today, and actually, the reason why I didn't change and try something different is because, hey, I figure if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
Which is the title of today's episode. And I got something interesting here, an actual definition. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, what does the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, mean? And I think you'll find this pretty self-explanatory. According to Cambridge, it's an informal saying said when you recognize that something is in a satisfactory state and there is no reason to try and change it. So there you go. There's an actual explanation for that saying, which is kind of funny because I think the saying says it all by itself. Pretty much.
Nice to have that official Cambridge.
It is. It's nice to know that Cambridge is on our side. So, Jeff, you had an example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why don't you share that with us now?
It's interesting. In 1966, they closed the station downtown. They wanted to get trains out of the downtown core, freight trains and passenger trains. And now, of course, they're building tracks back into the downtown core and also along the Transitway, which goes through Westboro. Well, that's the site of the old Canadian Pacific Railway line. So basically what they've done is they ripped up the tracks, or they buried them, and now they're building new tracks approximately 50 years later. So it's interesting how they had the foresight to understand that passengers rail into the downtown core made sense. It's interesting how it's come full circle in one sense that we're getting rail downtown.
Yeah. Now, what are the odds that they would have had to replace the rails anyway? I mean, or do rails? You would know. Do rails, would they last that long? I mean,
if they're buried under the ground, it would seem to me that they would probably have eroded somewhat. So I think they would have had to replace it if, in fact, they're actually still there.
So anyway, we're going to start off with the way we usually do. Then we are going to have Lou's Hair Chino in with a Meltdown Minute with Lou, and then some stupidness. But let's begin the way we always do, because, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Here are some Meltdown fun facts. Okay, so here we go. We are going to be talking about things that we don't do anymore because of technology. And this kind of relates to our topic because these are things I think we should still do for the most part. Some of them make sense, but some of them it'd be nice if we still did. Number one, memorizing a phone number. So here's a pop quiz. How many phone numbers do you know by heart? Some people don't even know their spouse's numbers. Before our smartphones automatically stored our friends' contact information, we resorted to cocktail napkins to scroll down numbers for fear we wouldn't find that listing in the phone book. So very true. Yes. And here's another one that ties directly into that. Figure out math in your head. When was the last time you did some math in your head? Calculators have been around for a long time now, but few of us ever carried calculators with us to the grocery store. In contrast, pretty much everyone with a smartphone has it available to do double-digit multiplication no matter where or when we need it. In fact, there's even an app called PhotoMath that can solve any equation just by taking a picture with your smartphone's camera. That's pretty scary. Here's something that we don't do anymore because of technology. Telling time by hands on a clock. Do we even look at the hands on a clock to tell time? Like cursive writing, analog clocks are teetering on extinction. Few people with smartphones bother with watches anymore unless they're fashion statements or fitness trackers. With digital clocks dominating our computers and hardware, those 12 numeral timepieces may become pure novelties. So there you go. Jeff, have you ever been in love?
Oh, yes.
And did you
I
ever...
am right now.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
But I'm going back to the beginning. Did you ever make your significant other a mixtape?
No.
Well, that is something else on our list. Something else we don't do because of technology these days is make mixtapes. There was something so personal about a mixtape. We spent hours finding the right song, then lining up 2 cassettes in order to copy a song. So many lovers cemented their relationships using a blank tape and a few dozen favorite albums. Now, you can throw together a digital playlist in seconds. And as we all know, if you just throw something together in seconds, it means nothing. So there you go. Here's one, Jeff, that you have talked about before. Something else we don't do because of technology is watch shows when they are broadcast live. In the same vein, we rarely have to sit in front of the television eagerly waiting for a major network event. Services like Hulu and YouTube convert a huge amount of national television into a digital format, and local news stations log most of their important segments onto their websites.
And I know people like that still. That there's 2 people I know from the library where I work, and they would be hanging out at the library, and they would say, "Oh, I got to get home at 8 o'clock because Dancing with the Stars is coming on." So they would actually have to get home, just like in the old days for me. And I think that's quaint. I think that's wonderful. But you're right. A lot of people, myself, as you know, Norm, I'm a big fan of Turner Classic Movies. I rarely watch a movie as it's being broadcast on TCM. I record them and watch them at my convenience.
Here's another thing that we don't or rarely do now because of technology is send a handwritten letter. Handwritten letters are more personal than a text or email. It's still wonderful to receive a postcard from faraway places. You might say that email, texting, and Skype conversations have made handwritten letters even more special, but no one is forced to transcribe their thoughts by hand and drop those letters in a mailbox. Something else we don't do because of technology is looking up the spelling of words in the dictionary. Spell check is nearly as old as word processors, and many of us have grown up expecting Microsoft Word to underline our mistakes in red squiggles. But autocorrect takes this concept a step further, guessing what we actually intend to write and correcting our mistakes. This can be handy for clumsy thumbs, but it can be embarrassing when autocorrect guesses wrong. And boy, oh boy, that has happened on numerous occasions. Do you remember? I think it was back in season 1.
Yeah.
And we were talking about texting.
Yeah.
And some of the things that people texted other people, not realizing that autocorrect had changed a word, and it changed entirely. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. This is a favorite of mine. Hi, Jan. Are you coming to the meeting at 4? Reply, I'll be there. Great. Please meet me in my office at 3:30 so we can have a brief cunnilingus beforehand. The reply, excuse me? I have no words. I typed conference and my phone changed it. I'm so sorry. Reply, wow. Here's
Proofread. Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Proofread everything. But then sometimes you're so busy, you're blah, 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 send, and then you go, oh my God. And it's too late once it's gone. Here's something that, this is your problem, Jeff. Because of technology, we don't carry enough change to make a phone call. Or in Jeff's case, he has holes in his pockets.
Yeah. Or to put a loonie or a toonie in for air when you need air.
Exactly.
That happened to me about 2 weeks ago, and I'm so happy that I actually
had to change,
loonie.
Yeah. Remember your mom or dad telling you, always carry a quarter because you never know when you'll need it. In a world of debit cards and Apple Pay, shoppers rarely have to carry cash anymore. So what happens when your phone is dead? There's no one around and all you have is a phone booth. Luckily, most public phones in the US and Canada are outfitted with credit card strips now, which is true. Here's something that they say we rarely do anymore because of technology, and that is use a travel agent. Travel agents can be essential for elaborate vacations, but for generic flights, services like Kayak and Cheap Flights have completely transformed how we book our passage. You can compare hundreds of airlines and agencies in seconds for the best deal. If you'd like to save even more, use Google Flights to find the cheapest airfare. And our last one, Jeff, and I don't know if this applies to you, but I certainly come from a time that I remember this, getting your old checks back from the bank every month.
Of course, yes.
You know, balancing your books meant you could see your canceled checks. You knew who cashed, who didn't. People still write checks, and physical paychecks are still routine methods of payment, but I doubt this antiquated practice will last much longer. Even depositing checks has become digitized, thanks to ATMs that scan the piece of paper and print a facsimile on your receipt. Gone are the days of banks sending you old checks to jam into filing cabinets. All right, let's now go to a Meltdown Minute with Lou.
So what we're going to talk about today, folks, as Norm and Jeff were just discussing, is this notion that we have of quote-unquote improving things, right? We have all these methods and procedures that we've had in place for hundreds of years that have worked well. Now all of a sudden we want them to be more convenient or more efficient or whatever the case might be. I'll give you an example. Letters. I miss getting letters. It indicated that someone took the time to sit down and actually write me a letter. They had to learn cursive, folks. Remember cursive? Cursive? Google it. Oh, wait. See, my point is, it opened up a part of your brain that you never got to use, and that's important. I'll give you another example. In high school, if there was a girl I liked, I had to make her a mixtape, right? So I had to figure out all of these songs, the length, and what side they're going to go on, and then the art for the tape cassette cover. And tape cassettes were what came before CDs. CDs are made from kind of a shiny, plasticky material, right? So it was CDs, tapes, and then records. Records were about this big, and they were made of wax, and they had tracks on it, and you would play it, and the music would come out, not by hand. It ran with a motor. I guess if you were in the Flintstones, you had to do it by hand. You had to put the toucan's beak down. I am super lost, and I'm not sure I made my point, but let's get back to it. I saw an ad yesterday, improving stuff. Yeah, see, I got it. Can someone call my high school teachers and tell them it's going to be okay? My point is this. I saw an ad for self-driving cars. In the back of the car is a full-on living room. How fucking lazy do you have to be to bring your ottoman with you on the 10-minute drive to Walmart?
Thank you very much, Lou. And now for some Meltdown stupidness. All right, so what we have for our stupidness today, we kind of have to do the opposite of what we did before. So here are 14 things that were acceptable in the 90s but aren't okay today. So here we go. Number 1, not confirming plans. We remember the days before those "I'm so sorry I actually can't make it" texts when people would make plans and simply show without any day of confirmation. And I think, because of texting and stuff, it's actually easier now to pull out at the last minute.
Yeah.
Before we had smartphones, if you made plans and you said you were going to show, you usually showed. It was called a commitment. Okay, here's number 2, not letting someone know if you're going to be late. That's a big pet peeve of mine. Similar to not confirming plans is not letting someone know if you're going to be late. There was no way to let a friend know you were running behind once you had both left home in the early 90s. Very true. Here's another thing that was okay in the 90s, not so much today, is walking a loved one to the airport gate. Boy, I pine for that. I really do. Bidding someone farewell at the airport gate without your own boarding pass definitely wouldn't fly today. Pardon the pun. And here's one we touched on in the first part, memorizing contact info. In the 90s, you had to write down or memorize important phone numbers. Today, it's just kind of weird. Now, if you tell someone you memorize their number, it makes you look like you're obsessed with them. What do you mean you know my phone number? You know it by heart? Why? It's true. Today, it would seem creepy. In the old days, it was common practice. You had to do it. Okay, here's another one. Refusing to keep up with technology. Remember when it was acceptable to say, "I don't do computers"? Can you imagine if someone completely denounced technology today? It's true. You'd be in a fog. You'd be nowhere. Everything is technology dependent. Here is another thing that was acceptable in the 90s that is not acceptable today, showing up at friends' homes. You remember showing up at a friend's home unannounced to see if they wanted to hang out in the 90s? Today, most of us generally require setting up plans in advance. And to take that a step further, just showing up is, I think, considered rude now.
Yeah.
And in the old days, it's just what you did. You actually just showed up and popped by. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I love it when people pop by," and not so much today.
Yeah, it's acceptable, I think, maybe like on Christmas Day or something like that,
Right.
a holiday. My relatives like to see me pop in on Christmas Day. Although, actually, my relatives, that's an exception. I know I could pop into the house anytime.
Here's something else that flew in the 90s, doesn't fly today, listening to the dial-up sound. Remember the sound your computer would make as you connected to the internet? Actually, let's play that sound right now.
Okay. and you had to, if somebody else wanted to use the phone, you had to stop using the internet for a while.
Yeah. And actually, you just spoiler alert.
Oh.
But here's another one. Here's something else that was, I guess, totally acceptable in the 90s, not so much today, is pushing people into pools.
Oh.
In the early 90s, when a soaked-through cell phone wasn't a concern, pushing people into pools was funny. Now you do it, and you're likely to owe that person $500, which is true, right? Because you often see in these movies, right, where people dive into pools or they get pushed into a pool and everyone's laughing, and it's like, yeah, it sucks if he's got a cell phone. It's toast now. Here's something else that was popular in the 90s that isn't today, having to use the rewind function. Now, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we don't have to rewind each episode of anything when we're binge watching shows on Netflix, which is true. Here's something else that was acceptable in the 90s, not today, smoking in restaurants. We're so glad smoking in restaurants, which was still allowed in the 90s, is now a thing of the past, and might I add, in airplanes too. I'm going to ask you, whoever thought it was a good idea to put hundreds of people in a tin can, thousands of feet in the air, completely surrounded by highly flammable jet fuel, and say, go ahead and light up. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah, well, not to defend it, but look how casual it was in so many respects. I mean, smoking in hospitals was acceptable at one point.
Well, there's movies where doctors are actually having to smoke while they're telling their patients how they're doing. You gotta cut down on that. Yeah. And here's the one that Jeff ruined: fighting to use the internet or phone. We all likely remember a time when we had to kick a family member off the internet so we could make a phone call. And for those of you who are millennials, there was actually a time when you could only do one or the other. Either you were on the phone or your computer was on the phone, but you couldn't do both. Nowadays, you have no idea how lucky you have it. Here's something else that we that don't do so much anymore, is paying with personal checks. When was the last time you saw someone pull out a personal checkbook to pay for his or her groceries? Well, this was common and totally acceptable in the 90s. Today, we're all about paying with plastic or by using our phones. Something else that was big in the 90s, not so much today, is calling people in general. There was a time when texting wasn't a thing, and we actually picked up our phones and called people. Yes, millennials, we did that. We talked to our friends with our voices over the phones, and sometimes even in person. And we would say something, and they would say something, much like the intercourse that Jeff and I are engaged in. And that's if you look up the word intercourse.
I know how you mean that.
I hope you do, Jeff, because as you can plainly see, the only kind of intercourse we're engaging in is verbal. And our last thing that flew in the 90s that won't fly today is using a physical map. And sometimes it's hard to believe that people were able to get around without the help of a handy GPS system, but physical road maps were a totally acceptable tool used for navigation in the 90s. And there was something about traveling, Jeff, taking a road trip, whatever, and you had a map with you, and you were the driver, and your passenger was the navigator. So they had the map, and they'd be kind of like telling you, okay, turn left here, or, we've got this many miles to go. And there was something, I don't even know what the word is.
I find maps.
It was exciting. It was adventurous.
Yeah,
it made it seem like you were on an adventure, right?
And that was the setup when I was traveling as a kid. My dad would, of course, be driving. Sometimes my mother, but usually my dad. And my dad would say, "All right, Jeff, you're the navigator." In other words, I'd have my map. And meanwhile, my little brother was next to me eating Ritz crackers, and it's a whole other story there. But
sounds like it.
So I was the navigator, and that was great. I pulled out the map. I think even if my dad knew where he was going, he wanted me to do something important. So it was like. And I felt important, yes, Dad, turn left here, and that's what we do, you know what I mean?
All right, so next week, we are going to be getting a little bit older and talking about aging. Because, from the moment we're born, Jeff, we start to die. And I know it sucks, but it's reality, and I hope you can join us for that show. Until then, my name's Norm.
And my name is Jeff.
And this has been The Meltdown. Cheers.